Semio. As one of the co-organizers, I'm here to make the closing remarks, but mainly to thank everyone who's involved to making this conference possible. I think of the city as always an experiential mode of existence, but I did not anticipate that this conference will require a lot of experimental thinking as well. As our previous panel has brought to our attention, actually reminded us, I guess it's very much with us, that we are holding this conference in a very strange time, and trying to cope with, but also trying to take on the challenges presented by it. So I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us in person and virtually. Overcoming time differences and risking travels and all that. I cannot thank you enough for making this conference possible. So I have a list of people that I want to go through very quickly. First and foremost, the NAM Center for letting us have this platform, the Perspectives on Contemporary Korea conference for our conversations. And that Tubman College of Architecture for co-sponsoring on the event, and Dean Massey for giving us the welcoming remarks, and of course, all the presenters, moderators, right, taking on this, the task that we have asked you unconditionally, and all the presenters who have brought such interesting array of topics for our discussion. But I think the biggest things is reserved for Francisco, without whom this conference would not have been possible. We met in May 2019, so obliviously about what was to come. And in Philadelphia, and Jeannie and Sujin were also there at a conference about Seoul. And we began a conversation about how we talk about this city. And that was right before Francisco was directing the Seoul Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism. And we discussed how we can bring the locally based Biennale to the United States and have that carry on that conversation in a different setting and in a different format. So we went through many different conversations, and it was the support from the previous director, Nojin Kwak, and of course, tireless work of Tohi Morseman, who initiated this. And of course, after their departure and promotion, Young Ju-ryu as new director, giving us full support financially and morally to make this possible. And our new and not so new wonderful staff, Kelsey, Evan, and Kate, everyone, and also help of the undergraduate fellows, every single person behind the scene and on scene. Without those, we would not have been able to carry this conversation. But I want to go back to this initial conversation that I had with Francisco at a dinner. So, and I think from very different perspectives, I was a historian rooted in area studies, studying 1920s and 30s. And Francisco was an international architect and scholar of architecture. How could two different people from different professions and fields and walk of life can come together to host an event like this? And it's just a matter of coinciding vision. And that's what we wanted to bring to this conference. The city as a collective does not gather people from the same walks of life, but from different walks of life who have shared vision. So this is a pure product of that visionary collaboration, and I cannot thank Francisco enough to let us kind of delve into the Biennale the whole discussion and the topics of Biennale and expand on that. So the way we envisioned this event was the gathering of people from all walks of life, mainly categorized arbitrarily as architects, artists, academics, and activists. But hopefully we are representing even larger groups of people, not only here, but also on the virtual space, whom we cannot see as the in-person presenters here. And why reclaiming the city, right? This is something that I want to ask Francisco to elaborate. We talked about, actually Francisco, especially during the pandemic, how the issues of social injustice have been highlighted. That is the effect of the pandemic. Our conference has been delayed, postponed, reformulated many times during the last 2 years. But the question that has stuck in our mind was, we need to address this issue of social injustice, spatial justice and social justice in one way or the other. And that has carried this conference. And that's something that was inspired by the 2019 Biennale that Francisco has curated. So I was told that I was the brain behind this conference, but I was not. So I'm going to invite Francisco to make that connection between the Biennale and this conference just briefly.
It is so typical of Semio to stay back and play up. She's the brains of it all. Don't let anybody fool you. She's been behind the conception of this, the making of it. Please give her a big round of applause. I've merely have been following what is an instinct of mine, a commitment to social justice, to understand that the city is not only a place or a space, but it's a condition that constructs our own very identities, and that we have to really, but they have the right to participate into it. And that the more we observe, the more we see the city as a promise of a political space disappear, to turn into a private space, an object of speculation, an object of segregation, exclusion, and that we are called as intellectuals, as artists, or as citizens to do what we can to reclaim our space into it. That is not going to happen if we don't do it, and that we need to create the tools and the spaces for it. And that was the motivation behind the Biennale, to go around the world, literally, collecting experiences that happen many times in the least, let's say, recognized in the Western world or in the Central world, of practices that are struggling to reconstruct a sense of the collective, that is trying to understand the city as a space. As I said, I'm very interested in the idea that the city is not a place of happiness, or to have a great cappuccino is not the measure of a good public space, but rather that it's a space of conflict, and that we live in times where there are many forces that are pushing those inequalities forward, not only economic and social, but spatial inequalities. So spatial and environmental justice has come to the front as much as has gender and other issues. So really the motivation is to go out for, or I guess the conversation was how to go beyond the boundaries of architecture to start connecting to the larger network of actors that are participating in the construction of those spaces, reclaiming the smaller spaces, situations, conditions that could construct a new vision of the city, that could give us hope that there's another promise to the city. There are other visions that can be constructed where we can live together without being softy or idealized, but actually in a very practical sense that we need those visions to be able to survive. It's not only environmental threat, but I fear that if social justice is not addressed, we'll probably end each other before the planet gets rid of humankind by the way we're treating it. So I'm very excited with what I've heard today. You know, it's an amazing array of perspectives, insights from very precise to very general. I do hope that we can use these opportunities not only to come together and have a good time, but to actually begin to invent, create new programs, new activities that we can start to share, that we get to know each other in ways that allows us to construct new projects, new ideas, new ways of acting, new modes of participation. So I would like to listen to the presentations not only as informations, but almost in an opportunistic way, like how can I participate in that? How can we find ways to collaborate that are not necessarily institutional, but have a larger sense of it? So thank you very much again.
We wanted this conference to take place on multiple planes and platforms. So we have, as Judy mentioned, yes, I did twist her arms. We have mini podcast series online featuring Judy Han on queer protest. So that particular podcast really explores the idea of queer thorough line that she mentioned today, and also a podcast with Hyungmin Bae. So if we couldn't continue the conversation early in the morning, I think the podcast is a good format to follow up on the most recent exhibition that he did. Also, there's the film screening going on through the Michigan Theater. And director Kelvin Kyungkun Park, who was a member of Flying City, the artist collective mentioned earlier today, is the first presenter tomorrow, Artist Talk. So it's a beautiful evening here in Ann Arbor, but if you have time, if you have not gotten a chance yet, please screen the film for the Artist Talk tomorrow. So we'll begin with the Artist Talk on Cheonggyecheon and revisit many of the sites that were mentioned in the morning sessions, and we'll expand our horizon to other cities in South Korea, such as Incheon and Gwangju, and even discuss the Trans-Pacific networks. So much more exciting things are to come tomorrow, and I hope to see you all again tomorrow early and bright Michigan time. Thank you.